first season of Terminator Zero, the new Terminator anime, has dropped on Netflix. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, what did you think about Terminator Zero, and give me that point of reference. What are your feelings on the Terminator franchise in general, as well as anime, thus giving kind of that perspective that you bring into this series. As for me, I adore the Terminator movies, in particular Terminators 1 and 2, are some of my favorite movies of all time. And even the ones that aren't so good, I at least enjoy them as big budget Terminator fan fiction because I just love this lore. But I'm not an anime person at all. I'm just not into anime. So I was very curious how I would respond to a Terminator anime. And going into this is a true anime. Its original language is in Japanese, I believe, and therefore you can watch it in the original Japanese that it's animated for with English subtitles, or you can watch the dubbed version of it. I watched the dubbed version of it. Most of this review is a conversation I'm gonna have with Leo from Geekly Goods, who's more of an anime fan, and he watched the subtitled version of it and kind of even discusses some of the ways that it's different in that version versus the dubbed version, kind of in the anime style, but like it is very much bringing that anime influence into it. So did that work for me? I'm gonna give my quick thoughts on the show in general, and then as I just mentioned, there's a long discussion with my buddy Leo, who's both a Terminator and anime fan, so he could bring in some of that perspective that I don't have, and I can have that perspective as the non-anime person. And cutting right to the chase, I found this to be a very fascinating expansion of the Terminator mythology. Whereas all of the films and even the previous TV show were Connor family focused, this is not about the Connors at all. I don't believe the name Connor is mentioned at any point in time in this story. And right there, for some people, the Terminator lore is just so intertwined with the Connors, understandably so, that might mean that this isn't interesting for you at all. But if you just kind of love the possibilities of the Terminator lore, if you really play it out, there's a lot here that this show has to offer. But if you just love the simplicity of the Cameron mythology, that robots take over, John Connor saves the day, time travel is involved, and the Connors save the day and stop the apocalypse, whether by stopping it from ever happening or defeating the robots. If you love that Cameron mythology, the show might not be for you because it really does kind of play out all this other stuff and gets into the time travel. But if you just love the possibilities of that lore and everywhere that it might go, this is really cool. And what I mean by that, I've said many times that I feel like the Terminator films after Terminator 2 are like big budget Terminator fan fiction, that I can just enjoy them as that because I love the lore. And this show kind of provides the framework for that to be a possibility. Where as a TV show, it's able to explore ideas a little bit more. This show is the Terminator at its most philosophical. It's Terminator diving into time travel and how that works in this mythology, the most it has ever done. And it's the Terminator at its most violent, and it's able to do some really brutal, gnarly, nasty stuff because it is animated, and it's shocking in a different way because it's animation. And the Terminator lore, as we normally explore it, is so kind of built around allusions to Christianity. John Connor, JC, Jesus Christ, the savior of mankind. John Connor, born of a mother where there's no father. Jesus. And this kind of pulls all that away, and let's do Eastern philosophy and ways of thinking. It brings all of that into the mix. And it's just so refreshing and different that if you like the lore, it's cool. It's really cool the way that it's able to do all of that. Back in 1999, when I first saw The Matrix, my thought was, this is just the Terminator with some anime influences. And as I was watching this, I was watching it like, this is like the Terminator, but with a bunch of influences from the Matrix. Which, no, it's not inspired by the Matrix. It's because so much of the lore of the Matrix came from inspirations that were the Terminator, but also anime. And this is anime. It's like, oh, well, that's fascinating. Just the way that kind of way it looks. And there are segments in this that just reminded me so much of parts of the Animatrix because it was anime as the Matrix, and they're pulling from these same influences. And it's just fascinating to me. And I didn't really like the Animatrix, and I don't really like anime, but because I like the Terminator and this, it's true enough to the lore, it really worked for me. The first 4 episodes of the season are almost a reimagining of the first Terminator film. There's a number of kind of similar beats, but a very different type of story, different types of characters, different types of setup. And then the back half kind of goes just somewhere very like, whoa, you're really going for it. Wow, well, we're getting deep into this. It's able to, because it is so anime influenced, it's able to be much more overtly philosophical in the way that characters just talk directly about things. So it's very different. For that reason, it's a different type of experience for a Terminator film. It won't be for some Terminator fans. It's just very anime influenced, and if you just don't like that, this might not work for you. Even some of the rules of the action, some of the logic and the way some things play out, it's very much anime logic, and that might not work for you. And that's understandable. That's fine. But if you like anime, which, and I don't even like anime, but I enjoyed, like, I really dug this show. But if you like anime and the Terminator, this might just be like this magical show made perfectly for you. So I was able to talk to my friend Leo, as I mentioned before. Here's what our discussion looked like. So with Terminator Zero, there's a couple interesting things about it. First off, it's only the second Terminator TV show we've ever gotten after the Sarah Connor Chronicles that was live action that came out 15 years ago, where Cersei Lannister was Sarah Connor, which, as I've rewatched some episodes recently, it's been interesting to me because it means the two people that were battling for the throne at the end of Game of Thrones played Sarah Connor, which is such a strangely specific thing to happen. Other interesting thing about it, it's an anime. Now, I know all about Terminator and TV shows, but anime is not something I know a ton about. So I brought my good friend in. Introduce yourself. Where can we find you on the internet?
Well, hey, Sean, thank you for having me on, man. I'm excited to talk some Terminator Zero and some anime. Name's Leo Rydell. I'm over on Geekly Goods. You guys can come on over there, and we talk Marvel movies, DC, and TV over there on the regular. And I'm a huge anime fan. Been into Dragon Ball Z since I've been young. Still enjoy anime to this day. And when they said 2 of my favorite things, Terminator franchise and anime are coming together, man, I had to get to this as soon as I could. So I really can't wait to talk about it.
Well, that was, even as I was watching it, I was like trying to come up with my language to describe it. And I was like, well, it's anime, but it's not Dragon Ball Z anime. It's not Studio Ghibli anime. So it's like Akira. That's like my one point of reference for grown-up anime. 35 years ago, movie I watched when I was in high school in the 90s. I was like, I probably should bring someone in that can bring more specificity to the discussion for people that are in the world of anime and they kind of want to know how it compares, because I just can't bring that perspective. So first question to you, just in general, what did you think about the show as a Terminator fan, as an anime fan, and as just someone that likes media?
Well, like you were saying, it's definitely not your traditional shonen. It's not your Naruto. It's not your My Hero Academias. It's not the sort of traditional younger audience. It's a seinen is what it's called. And it's, think Ghost in the Shell, Vinland Saga, some of the more mature anime. It's bloody, it's gory. It does not hold back its punches. So it is an anime going in. You don't want to assume that this is going to be like Dragon Ball Z. But, man, blending these 2 styles together, I really enjoyed. First and foremost, I just love the lore of the Terminator. But I feel like aside from the Terminator and Terminator 2, almost every other installment I've seen has just not quite been right. And this one got a lot right that I really enjoyed. It's my favorite since Terminator 2 in terms of the sequels. I actually haven't seen the Sarah Connor Chronicles, so I need to get on that. But I have really enjoyed it. The character work, getting a new story, getting away from the Connors. I'm really liking exploring this lore in a different environment and different world.
Yeah, well, so I think one thing that kind of stuck out to me when this show started to elaborate on the lore, because it's, as a TV show, it's able to kind of dive into ideas more and philosophy more. And in doing so, it almost creates the mechanism by which to be able to say that all of these different things tie in properly. There's an explanation for it all. And you can write off whichever ones you want. You can say whichever ones you want fall into the lore. I've been saying for years that I view all of the sequels after Terminator 2 as fan fiction. Fan fiction that I enjoy just because I like the world and the lore, but it's all just big, expensive fan fiction to me. And this is like the show that almost provides the mechanism for that to even make sense in the lore of what you're trying to do with all of it. So kind of throwing it back over to you, can you dive into the specific anime influences on it? As an anime fan, how would you review this?
I would say it's very, very well done. I mean, you've got the typical anime style, the drawing and art style itself, but you've got those anime-isms, if you will. You've got the running on the wall, you've got the swinging ropes, you've got this adventure that doesn't have the physical limitations of live action, but also it brings a lot of heart to anime and mature themes that I think the Terminator franchise definitely has touched on before, but they, like you were saying, they had time to dive deeper into it. And that's something that anime typically dives deeper into, is emotional thematic messages that are just a lot deeper than some of their live action counterparts. And even just the gore, the blood, the extremity, those things are just so anime, like so insane.
I'll talk about the gore in just a second. But on the idea of the themes and the discussion of ideas, this is the most philosophical that Terminator's ever been. I mean, there's always been elements of that, just kind of the subtext in, especially Terminator 2 about man's inhumanity to man, and we're not going to make it. And it kind of takes some of those ideas and provides a plot mechanism that you don't feel like Hollywood wouldn't make a movie that does what this show does with one of its main characters, that essentially the whole show is a philosophical debate about the merits of mankind. And it fits into what's happening. It ties into it. It doesn't overly, like, it's cutting back and forth between the action and this, but it's so different than what you would ever see in a Hollywood film doing. And the other thing kind of to that idea that you mentioned, the idea of a different context and diving into ideas, the original Terminator lore has very obvious allusions to Christianity with the savior of mankind, JC, John Connor, Jesus Christ, from a mother that there's not a father in it. Like, not subtle when you're going with the JC there. And they move this into Japan, and it gets into so much of the philosophical discussion. It's not a Western discussion of philosophy and religion. It's a very different perspective of the world, and tying that into kind of what's kind of going on with the discussion of AI, the merits of mankind. It's a very different worldview, which I just thought was fascinating. And all of that ties back into that makes sense because it's anime, and it would be weird if it didn't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It just does these deep dives that really bring you into a new place in the franchise. And the way it describes time, too, without getting into too many spoilers, it describes the lore in a way where you can involve and understand the other Terminators from this point of view. And I think that this anime series had so much more time to expand on those ideas that were set up in some of them. And the callbacks are really great. I mean, it just does a really good job of even referencing score in this show. I mean, you pulled I think in the first or second episode, there's like the Terminator theme from the first two movies. Very well heard. So it just does such a great job of sticking to the mechanics of Terminator, but like you were saying, bringing in those Eastern philosophical, bigger ideas into it and diving deeper into these characters, diving deeper into human and cyborg relations. It's just so deeper and more heavy than the typical Terminator we're used to.
Well, and that's the advantage of television. When you don't have 2 hours, but you have over 4 hours, you can do an episode, and each episode has a couple action set pieces, but then you have those moments where you can pause, and whether through the literal dialogue that takes place between in one setting are the people that are more in on the action on the episode to episode basis, you're able to talk through all those kind of more subtle ideas. In a movie, you only can get a couple of them. Well, here you get one in every episode, and that adds up across the series. Where you keep expanding and building on the ideas in a way that's just interesting. That like part of what made the original Terminator so great is that it is such a dense concept that like these are really good ideas. These are really fun sci-fi ideas that it works as a simple survival story, but you can also go, what about this? What about this? And here we are with a show that it unpacks all of those. As you talked about, the concept of time travel, how does that work? What are the implications of everything that's been going on in all these other stories that we've heard? And then, the nature of like, why was Skynet the way that Skynet was? Like,
right.
In the one hand, we've spent a lot of time about Skynet bad, but why did Skynet go bad? Was there something with Skynet besides its existence? And like, how could it could have played out? It's such a different perspective on even problem solving and solving the problem of evil AI that we have to battle. It's just a different thing. And you go, well, that's interesting. That's cool. It's different.
And something that it does and this is all anime. I don't know if you watch the sub or the dub, but especially in the sub, the way that they deliver lines, the diction of the emotion, like the emotions ride high in a lot of these episodes. I mean, you get these moments that just the emotions kind of come from a place of, okay, building up, and then you ramp up. And the delivery matches those emotional highs. And those are things that anime exposes that sometimes live action, it can even come across a little cheesy, but it just makes so much sense in anime. And it's just such a welcome addition to this franchise.
All right, I cut you off in the middle when we were going into the violence. So my wife ended up not watching it with me. She was kind of interested, and then I showed her the Red Band trailer, and she's like, I don't know how much. This looks a little bit too intense for me. And like it's very intense anime violence of limbs ripped off, heads, like bones snapping, in a way that you don't have a lot of violent animation coming out of Hollywood. That's not a thing. And so it's almost, as someone that doesn't watch a lot of anime, it's disturbing in kind of a way that you're not used to watching whenever you see like an arm get turned into mush in animation and you don't watch that a lot. It is really unsettling. Do you want to unpack some of that as the anime fan?
Yeah, I mean, like I was talking a little earlier about the genre seinen, it's very adult. I mean, they do not pull back any punches. It's very similar to this with sometimes even more adult themes, but it is very, very gory. I mean, they go over the top. I mean, you mentioned Akira. That's one example. Ghost in the Shell. That's another example. Vinland Saga, Code Geass. These are all shows and movies that just do not do the Studio Ghibli version. They really go all the way. It's like, okay, the difference between Miss Marvel and Daredevil, the Netflix Daredevil. Like, they go grime. They go hardcore. There are like shots in this show where I'm just like, oh, it looks like a battlefield out there. And they don't hold back the blood. They don't hold back the gore. You just see some Terminators do some absolute terminating in ways we did not see in the movies. I mean, I was like, wow, okay, that guy's face just got crushed in this Terminator's hand. I mean, just straight up bare hand crushing people's limbs. I'm like, this is just things we have not seen before. And so I think with anime, and we got Tomb Raider coming up, we've got all these other adaptions that are taking the anime route, also Lord of the Rings. They have that ability to play in that playhouse and become a little more mature, explore mature themes. In the Tomb Raider trailer, she's like there's like a scene in one of the teasers where there's like these voices in her head, kind of knocking her confidence down. I'm like, these are things that the Tomb Raider movies did not dive too deep into. So it's just allowing for those adult themes, the gore, the more mature side of animation. It allows it to really blossom and flourish.
And I think the other one that it does tied to that, even on kind of an ethical level, it goes to a darker place where the actions of our protagonists and the justification of some of the things that they do both overt actions in the course of the greater good, as well as things where the potential choices that they make get really dark. It's not just Terminators that do it, and it goes there, and you go, oh, in a sense that both in the sense that Hollywood doesn't normally do that, and in live action in Hollywood, it plays even darker, that you can get a little bit away with it because it's animated, but also that it's anime. There's just a different mindset in what fits in this world, and what is allowed. And Terminator is a dark story, obviously.
Yeah,
and it really goes there.
Yeah, to that point. The main characters in most Western media, even Western animation, you want to make the main character a very likable character most of the time. You know, sometimes we kind of deviate and add different things that may be a little unlikable. But here you have literal choices that these characters are making that you're like, I don't know if I really like that. Yeah. And it's just like crazy. I mean, one of the main character, the father figure of the show, I know you can relate as a father, me as a godfather. I was like, some of the choices he's making, I'm like, dude, it's like I would never, like, it's crazy the questions they ask in the show.
Yeah, like you, they're doing that. And then likewise, our hero does some things that in Hollywood, that would not be heroic. That is not heroic if you do that. And and some of them are things that they didn't even have to. The sort of things that in Hollywood, they would like have a line of dialogue to say, hey, everybody's okay. This one has the opposite line. Everyone's not okay with what just happened. They go, if that happens, there's consequences, and it allows it to happen. And it's just like such a different mentality that gives it a very different flavor to it that kind of stands out in an interesting way. All right, any final thoughts, anything else that we wanted to kind of throw in there as to convincing people to or not to watch the show?
I think if you're a fan of either Terminator or anime, I honestly think this will be for you. Terminator fans, I really think it'll provide a different side of Terminator that maybe we've been looking for, or maybe we hadn't thought about, but will give you a little bit more thought and another path in that genre. And then for anime fans, some might feel like, believe it or not, Sean, some may feel like it's a little tame, especially in the beginning. But once it hits the ground running, man, this thing is running, and it like you said, it's dark, it's gory, does not stop.
That's right. One thing you said in there, if you want Terminator and want something different, you think about it, since Terminator 2, basically we've just kind of rehashed Terminator 2 a bunch of times besides Terminator Salvation. And it's like, I feel like the Terminator 2 broke the franchise where they just keep trying to get back to that movie when that's always kind of been the wrong answer. And at the beginning of this one, the first 4 episodes are a little bit of a reimagining of Terminator 1. In a sense, a little bit, but it's wildly different. But like the first 4 episodes you can see is a reimagining, but it's doing something so different with the mythology, with the characters, with the use of time travel. Well, you have a Terminator in pursuit. You have the twists and turns of who's what's and how do they tie into it and what are they doing. But it does all this stuff in a new and different way, in a different context, with a different philosophy, ethic, all that stuff, that it provides this fresh, new experience. Where can we find you on the internet one more time?
Anywhere you're on the internet, that's YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. You can find me at Geekly Goods, y'all. Chat and geek, Marvel, DC, movies, and TV. Come on over and let's chat.
If you want something different in the Terminator world, I think Terminator Zero provides it. I hope we get a season 2 to kind of play out this new mythology and the ideas that they're exploring. Like in my mind, there are kind of 2 Terminator canons. There's the 2 movies, and then there's the fan fiction stuff. And now with this show, there's a lore that I can just accept that, like play into that and like, yeah, there's these 2 things, and I'm okay with that. And there's an explanation for why we get Terminator Genesis and all this weird stuff. It provides an explanation, even Terminator Dark Fate, and plays it all out in its own little bubble world. And if you want the Cameron stuff, that's the Cameron lore over here. I dug it. I think a lot of you probably will dig it, but it won't be for everybody because it is very anime, and it does double down on kind of that expanding the lore beyond the Connors. And if the Connor family is pivotal to you, this show might not work for you. You can check out my Terminator ranking like right over there. You can check out Leo's channel. I'll have a button somewhere. If his review's up, I'll link to that. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.